So today, unfortunately, we're going to be talking about Pedro Pascal. Now, Pedro Pascal, so there's been a lot going on because it seems like the tidal wave of general support and people calling him daddy or whatever, that has not necessarily subsided, but there is a, let's say, contrary wave. So we have two waves, a contrary wave of people who are fatigued. Honestly, I'm fatigued. Not necessarily by Pedro Pascal himself, though I'm having my own suspicions, but that's a different story. It was kind of like with Barbie. I have nothing against Margot Robbie. I think she's a fantastic artist. I got fatigued on Barbie, and I was one of the people who dressed up to go to the movie theater with my mom. I cosplayed it. I had a fun time. But after a certain period, it becomes tiring to talk about the same actor and the same movie over and over and over. I just start hating the movie. At some point, honestly, I start hating the movie, I start hating the show, whatever the case is. It's overexposure, it's too much, and it becomes sensory overwhelm. That's what a lot of people are starting to feel with Pedro Pascal. The issue is that Pedro Pascal, upon reviewing more footage of him on red carpets, upon seeing that he's in seemingly any movie ever at this point, Pedro Pascal seems to be casted in everything, whether the role suits him or not, in my opinion. And that is why people are getting fatigued. I don't have so much fatigue of him as much as just like the social media blast of him everywhere. It's like, I don't need news of what he ate for breakfast or his sock colors. Kind of over it. I'd like to focus on actors as actors and not them outside. This leads us to the point of this video. Now, because he's been blasted everywhere, people have become critical, as it always happens. There's a tide of love, you're great, you're the best actor, Daddy Pascal, whatever the fuck. And then there's a tide that comes from the other side that's like, we've seen enough, you're not that talented, and you're acting creepy on the red carpet. Neither of these are my opinions, by the way. My opinion is a little more complicated, though I do think something is the fuck up there, but anyway, this new tide where we're seeing people be kind of tired of him, they started dissecting videos, clips, photos of him on the red carpet, and they've noticed that he's very touchy with often very conventionally attractive female co-stars. Now, he claims to have anxiety. I'm not going to say he doesn't have anxiety. That being said, a lot of people are like, okay, so he just has anxiety when there happen to be beautiful women that he can do heavy petting on, is the term that a lot of social media users are using. It is odd. And the more I see it, the more I'm kind of creeped out. And a lot of people are saying, oh, Pedro Pascal's gay, which as far as I know, that's not confirmed. But even if it were, being gay or any kind of orientation is not a pass to touch people however you want. So honestly, whatever about that. There's also been critique about just like how heavily touchy he's been in connection to this alleged anxiety, which people think he's using as an excuse to just kind of get away with certain behaviors that other men wouldn't get away with. Which please keep that in mind, because I have a question for anyone who's staunchly defending this behavior. I have one main question. We'll get to that. I went on Twitter. Funnily enough, there aren't many articles written about this new quote unquote hate wave on Pedro Pascal. So we're just gonna go through tweets that I bookmarked on the subject, coming from all sides, different opinions, and we'll discuss them. So first of all, there's this video, and this video that you see right here has been getting a lot of coverage, mainly because he is extremely touchy, especially for a pregnant woman. I don't know about you guys, but I get really uncomfortable when people very openly just touch pregnant women's bodies. Now, they're friends, so it's a different story, but you know when you just have the creepy man who's like, can I touch your stomach? And it's like, who the fuck are you? Here, that's different. But there are people who are zooming in on the fact that at some point it seems like she's kind of pushing his hand away. So people are also wondering about these two generally because she's married. She's also very touchy. This is not a one-sided thing, but since this video is about Pedro Pascal, we're going to focus on him. This video is already a point of contention. Now, there are a lot of memes that have come out using Sergeant Dokes from Dexter, as you can see here. And it's actually gotten people to start watching Dexter because they want to kind of understand the context behind Sergeant Dokes, which is hilarious because he's like one of the first people to pick up on the fact that Dexter is up to some shit. A lot of people are claiming there's something off about Pedro Pascal. They just can't put their finger on it, which is honestly a sentiment I rather agree with. I really liked him in the Game of Thrones that I did see. I didn't see all of it. In a bunch of series, I actually did like him. Now the overexposure is getting a little too much for me and I had to step back because I'm like, I can't watch the same actor in like 5 different things at the same time. On that gay note, someone, and this tweet has 114,000 likes, said, I don't understand this Pedro Pascal discourse. Does the Gen Pop not know he's gay? And there are a lot of people that are claiming this. I've not seen any confirmation and I know that he's relatively private about his relationship status, his private life. So I'm just going to leave that there. If he doesn't want to share that, And also, just because you're gay, it doesn't mean you can just be touchy on people however you want. So it really is not relevant in my opinion. Here's a tweet that defends Pedro Pascal that says, Pedro Pascal hate is funny. That man has worked for years in TV and movies to only have his moment late in life. He's ready. He has been ready. He's passionate and hungry, and luckily for him, he has a great agent and team. Oh, and he seems to be a delight to work with. And these are not things I disagree with. That being said, two things can be true at once. You can think that he deserves this and also not want to be blasted with Pedro Pascal news all over your timeline, okay? So I understand both sides of this. And honestly, as someone who's neither a hater nor a fan, I'm just kind of whatever about Pedro Pascal. It's just the sameness of the timeline. The same way that people got tired of seeing shit about Labubus. It's like, I don't give a fuck about a Labubu. If you want the keychain, get the keychain. If you don't want the keychain, burn it. I don't care. What I do care about is my timeline being flooded with it. It's a different thing. So then there's the claim that this is astroturfing and also basically a smear campaign done by TERFs due to Pedro Pascal's political opinions. And this is where I'm going to have to say a solid no, in my opinion. I don't think the majority of the hate that Pedro Pascal is getting, and the actual hate, because some of it is valid critique and some of it is actually hate, okay? I think that the valid critique and the hate he's getting, those two things are relatively unrelated to his politics at all, because people are saying, oh, it's because he's an ally, because he supports trans people. And granted, there are going to be some people who are transphobes who hate Pedro Pascal, of course. There are going to be some racists who hate him, of course. But I don't think that the people who are critiquing him or hating on him, the vast majority, I think it has all to do with entertainment, all to do with overexposure, all to do with general overwhelm of seeing the same person over and over. I actually don't think it has to do with anything related to trans people, Israel, Palestine. I don't think it has to do with that. Also because I think for the most part, people on Twitter are not as informed as they pretend to be. So I don't even think they could come up with that type of take. But maybe that's just my opinion of what happens on Twitter, it being a cesspool. Here, in fact, to back that up, it's funny how easily people are falling for an AstroTurf hate campaign against Pedro Pascal that was actually started by a TERF, but whenever it comes out that a male actor has actually been a creep towards women, it's crickets. Now, I understand this take. My take to this is different because most of the people I follow are disgusted when men are creeps. So I don't know what this is a reference to, like who was outed that was completely forgiven. Plenty of people in the past, of course, but who are we comparing this to in this specific instance? I don't know. Now, this being an AstroTurf hate campaign, I know plenty of people in real life who organically, they're just not about this. So I don't think all of this is AstroTurfed, and I think this is actually not that surprising of people being over it. It happens with basically every actor who's in the spotlight for too long. The thing about Pedro Pascal that's also interesting is that a lot of people are turning this into a gender situation, which you guys know I'm not a super fan of, to say like, oh, all the people who misunderstand Pedro Pascal are men and all the people who understand him and are comfortable with him are women. Because honestly, as a woman, obviously I don't know this man, but I feel uncomfortable seeing certain clips. I'm like, ugh, I don't know about that. No. Now, that's not to say that the women who deal with him feel that way. But as a non-man, I'm going to tell you, there are plenty of women who are not super down with Pedro Pascal's behavior on the red carpet, and I don't think it's men necessarily misunderstanding it. Of course, there's some men who don't know what it's like to have a friend that's a woman. They'll not get it, sure. At the same time, maybe it's how I am and how a lot of people seemingly are. I'm not that touchy with friends who are married of the opposite gender. Pedro Pascal is the first man that's going to be canceled by other men for inappropriate behavior with women. But the other thing is, Pedro Pascal is physically affectionate with the women around him without sexualizing it, and most men can't comprehend that because they sexualize every interaction they have with any woman. Now, this has a valid point. There are some men who sexualize everything. Sure, that exists. At the same time, interlinking hands like this, like doing this, I don't know about you guys, I don't hold hands like that with just anyone. I find that particularly intimate if we're really gonna go there. So I thought that was really fucking odd. And if I saw my partner doing that with their friend, it would not be a fun conversation when we got home. It doesn't necessarily have to be sexual to the viewer. It's what's sexual to the person doing it. And we don't know what's sexual to Pedro Pascal, but we can all agree that there's certain limitations on behaviors that become weird, not because they're sexualized, but because they're outside of the norm. Example, you're giving your friend who's of the opposite gender and you are both hetero, you give them a hug. If you linger too long on the hug, if your hands are too low on their hips, a bunch of things like that, even if you're not sexualizing them, you are going against an established norm, which then makes the thing weird. So even if you weren't sexualizing it or they weren't sexualizing you, there's something that throws the norm off kilter, let's put it that way. So I don't think it's that odd to understand, and I don't think this is necessarily a big projection. What we can say is, does he have anxiety and potentially he's dealing with that anxiety in an odd way? Yeah, we can say that. Is it possible he doesn't have anxiety and he's just being really, really touchy and doesn't know boundaries? Yeah. Is it possible that he knows exactly what he's doing and he's using anxiety as an excuse? Yeah. All of these things are possible. I don't know which one is true, but I think it's a little bit ridiculous to act in either extremes here, whether it's, oh, men don't understand that you can have women friends, because that's not all men, obviously. And I think that there's also weird shit going on here, so it's not just about friendship. But I also don't think we can say, oh, this is obviously sexual harassment. It's somewhere in between, and I think that that's what makes it difficult, because we don't know where to start processing this information. But also, I'm going to ask one thing to the people who are staunchly thinking that it's just men misinterpreting this and that Pedro's just a fun guy, being friendly, whatever. My question is this. If Pedro Pascal were not a conventionally attractive man, would we come up with this many excuses to defend him? If Pedro Pascal were what we might call creepy, would we be here saying, no, he's just for the girls and the gays, and it's all fine, it's all fun, the women like him, the women aren't threatened by him, they appreciate him, he's total golden retriever, whatever TikTok lingo bullshit. If he were ugly, would we be having this same conversation? Would there be this type of lenience? As in my mind, if Pedro Pascal were ugly, or if he were deemed at all creepy in his mannerisms, like physically looking, not behaviorally, physically, I don't know if people would just be like, oh, he's just for the girls and the gays. Oh, he's fine. The girls don't mind. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a double standard that we're witnessing here, and I think that that's an important thing we should talk about as well. Like I said before, I don't know what the case is. Do I think something's up there? Yes, I think this is weird behavior. Could it be the anxiety? Sure. But I'm not a fan, and that might be me. I'm biased. I don't know if the people who are typing all this stuff are biased in some similar way, but I do think it's a more complex discussion than like men are bad and don't understand friendship, or Pedro Pascal is a complete pervert. I think it's something else. Anyways, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.